Support for this program comes from viewers like you. Thank you.
More classic stories about the great people of Kansas are queued up and ready to roll.
And here's a preview.
At that time, it was felt that a black person really did not have the intellect to work side by side with such a technical endeavor.
Were they ever wrong? Jacob Mitchell reached for the stars and helped land a man on the moon. His inspiring story coming up. Also,
Burdett played quite an important role in the discovery of Pluto, whether you realize it or not.
Here's another Kansas space pioneer. Clyde Tombaugh discovered the planet Pluto. See the hero's welcome he received when he returned home. Plus,
and the home of the...
Whatever courage it is that it takes for a soldier to bear arms.
For all soldiers, Uncle Vito.
I do not have that kind of courage.
what Tracy Sloat did have was a gift for acting and storytelling, and a heart for soldiers protecting our freedom. You'll see how she put all that together for a touching tribute to the troops. And
work, you have to do it. It's life. You have to work all your life, and I wanted to start a little earlier than other kids.
But Nick Hoskinson didn't have just any old job. This teenager had his own poultry farm, and we're not talking chickens or turkeys. See how he did it and learn what has happened since. Hi everybody, I'm Larry Hatteberg.
And I'm Susan Peters. Those are just a few of Larry's classic stories we will rewind and revisit.
A half hour of Hatteberg's People starts right now. These stories are like old friends. Their lives radiate from the screen like prophets of the past. They were teachers, but not in a classroom. Instead, they taught about life to those around them who cared to listen, and I was their student.
He's one of those Kansans who lives quietly among us, yet his place in human history is monumental.
Humankind's greatest achievement came 50 years ago with those famous words, "The eagle has landed."
And one of the people who helped engineer that mission was Jacob Mitchell of Wichita. He was making history and paving a way for the future in more ways than one.
It is where man had dreamed of going since the dawn of time, the moon. Poets could write about it, but only dreamers and folks like Jacob Mitchell thought it might be possible.
I knew that I had a great part in this becoming a reality.
He did. Wichitan Jacob Mitchell was part of history in two ways. First, he was an engineer on the Apollo moon project in the 60s, and he was in the first group of black engineers ever hired by NASA.
The group that I worked in was called a systems integration group, which meant I had the privilege of seeing everything was being done, but I couldn't say anything about it because it was all secret work.
He was a telemetry expert and focused all his attention on the project, working in secret so not even his wife knew what his job was.
And I never heard one complaint from her because she knew that whatever I was doing had to have been important. So I owe a lot of my success to her.
But in the early days of NASA, racism and the 60s went hand in hand. Even on this history-making project, he felt the sting of occasional discrimination.
Because at that time, it was felt that a black person really did not have the intellect to work side by side with such a technical endeavor.
Now, that part of history is just pictures in a scrapbook, but back then, Mitchell had to be the best he could be. Armed with education, degrees, and intellect, Mitchell endured.
It didn't overwhelm me. It's because everything we were doing was so new and technical.
There was simply too much at stake, both in the Apollo program and to him as an African American. But he had a plan. Anytime an act of racism occurred, he just remembered the words of his grandmother.
She said, hear what you want to hear and see what you want to see. It does work.
But on his Wichita front porch with his family, most would never know this quiet-spoken man helped boost a man to the moon. but in a smaller way made cultural inroads that helped pave the road to integration in a time when change was written in a man walking on the moon and man walking as an equal partner in the workplace. Common now, but then it was like reaching for the stars.
Now, a half century after that historic moonwalk he helped engineer, Jacob Mitchell continues to live a quiet, unassuming life right here in Wichita. He made a difference to a whole generation of people and really to the world.
And really, it's amazing that he lived and still lives right here in Kansas.
That's right.
We are proud to have him.
And indebted to him.
Well, long before the moon landing, this next Kansan made a discovery of astronomical proportions.
His name was Clyde Tombaugh, and he discovered the 9th planet in the solar system. That would be Pluto. And that made him one of the most famous astronomers of the 20th century and the most famous person to ever come out of Burdett, Kansas.
The skyline of Burdett, Kansas rises out of the countryside towards the heavens, and it's the heavens that put Burdett on the map. In 1930, this man, Clyde Tombaugh, a former resident, discovered the planet Pluto. So the community decided to honor their favorite son.
We have some remarks now, but
the residents of Burdett dedicated a highway marker honoring Tombaugh, who once lived on a farm northwest of the city.
Our roots, my roots in the Burdett community go very deep. We've been here a long time, and Burdett played quite an important role in the discovery of Pluto, whether you realize it or not.
Tombaugh was 24 and an astronomer at Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff when he discovered the 9th planet. As this story from a 1930 edition of the Larned newspaper says, it was hailed as the greatest achievement in astronomical science in 100 years. So when Tombaugh came back home, residents responded. Autographs and pictures were popular.
if you wish to take some pictures, Dr. Tombaugh and his wife will be standing by the sign for picture taking.
The 1925 graduate of Burdett High School said the planet Pluto might have been named Cronus if it wasn't for the ego of a fellow astronomer.
He was so egotistical, he was absolutely repulsive to astronomers, and he had predicted the planet, he had suggested Cronus. Well, we weren't about to make him puff up with naming it called planet, so that was the reason we rejected Cronus. You see, a little politics involved in this once in a while.
Burdett added that one lady in another city thought he was the author of the Pluto the Pup comic strip. Well, can't win them all. Larry Hatteberg, TV 10 News, Burdett, Kansas.
Tombaugh also discovered 15 asteroids in his career and has a crater named after him on Mars, among other things. Now, he did die in 1997 at the age of 90. But boy, he put Burdett, Kansas on the map and put Kansas on the map, really.
And discovered a planet and asteroids.
Yeah.
Hard to wrap your head around.
Not many people do that in their lifetime.
That's true. Well, American pride took a different turn in the early 2000s when American troops were deployed to Iraq.
Now, this got Wichitan Tracy Sloat thinking about the national anthem and what the words really mean. So she put her talents to work to educate and inspire a nation and a military facing very uncertain times.
I don't want to say this again. Leave me alone.
In an upstairs studio overlooking West Douglas in Wichita, Tracy Sloat runs the Actors Lab.
So I want you to put your back to that wall, because remember how we directed this, Andrea? I wanted you to look to the mirror as though you were looking to Billy. I want the reflection of the mirror to be the person you're talking to.
But as sometimes happens in life, events occur that change our course. And that happened to Tracy.
I think my desire to understand the words of the Star-Spangled Banner have been with me all my life. And I saw soldiers coming home from the Vietnam War. One of the first seeds of the story was how the Vietnam soldier or veteran was treated.
So this actress teacher set out to follow her heart. She made a film, now a DVD, about what the words to the Star-Spangled Banner mean to her.
I asked the Lord to give me a vision so that I might understand the meaning behind it. And I got one.
Titled Still There, it's about a Vietnam veteran who knows what sacrifices he made for the flag, but is disgusted about the apathy he sees.
It keeps teaching me how fundamental art is, when it can be used to heal or when it can be used to inspire.
In the film, as the veteran sits at the bar, Teresa's character continues talking with her uncle about this vision of what the words of the Star-Spangled Banner really mean.
I saw a trench.
So what?
A trench. And in the trench were soldiers. Hundreds of them laying there in the cold and dark. Everything in my life led to the opportunity and the faith to tell that story in that film. And then I heard the sound, unlike anything I'd ever heard before in my life. If people embrace it the way that they have and are moved by it, then I'm grateful that I was able to do the job and do it effectively. It was their agony. It was their uncertainty. It makes me humble. It makes me proud. And the home of the... Whatever courage it is that it takes for a soldier to bear arms. For all soldiers, Uncle Vito. I do not have that kind of courage. But what I do have is the ability to extend my hand and say thank you for having that kind of courage. And that is, in a nutshell, what this story is about.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for our national anthem.
With the approval of Central Command, 1,000 DVDs of Tracy's story arrived in Iraq this month for the American troops. Now you can watch Tracy's 9-minute film online if you search for it. Again, the title is Still There. Sadly, Tracy passed away of cancer in 2016 at age 56. She was an incredible woman, incredibly talented woman, and a great storyteller.
And you could almost call her a hero. And her legacy lives on with the video, and it's called
Still There.
Still There. You can search for it and watch it right now.
That's right. It's great.
Okay, now to a young Reno County man with a rock-solid work ethic who had an idea and hatched his own business.
Now, he was a livestock farmer, but we're not talking cattle, hogs, or chickens.
This is every hunter's dream, is hearing that sound when they all covey up and get going. I think I have it pretty good. I have a good family and a good job that supports whatever I want to do.
And this is what he wants to do, raise quail. On the fringe of Haven, Kansas, Nick Hoskinson is in the mainstream of his life, and that's because these birds are his life.
My goal was 10,000 at my senior year, and this is my senior year, and I reached 10,000. I hatched 10,000 this year. Hunters like to hunt them, and so do I, and I don't really get too attached to them just because I raise so many.
The Covey Rise Quail Farm is Nick's operation. At 18, he's already been an entrepreneur of this little venture for 4 years.
This is the flight pen to help them get stronger in flying qualities. It's 150 foot long. When they get out in the field, it makes them a lot more harder bird to hit, and they flush a little easier. You have to like the job to be able to do a good job. And I think me raising quail and being able to go hunting whenever I want, because I get to be my own boss, it just makes it a lot easier on you when you like what you're doing, and I like raising quail. Work, you have to do it. It's life. You have to work all your life, and I wanted to start a little earlier than other kids.
And we're talking serious work. At his home, above the garage, the hatchlings, not yet ready to be placed in the pen.
You got to clean it out so well. They catch diseases so easy that you just got to watch them 24 hours a day.
In Haven, Nick Hoskinson may only be a high school senior, but when he looks at his life through this fence...
Yep, this is what I like to do.
He sees his future looking back at him.
It keeps me out in the outside. I don't want to be stuck in a factory, really.
In Haven, I'm Larry Hatteberg.
That was 2005. After graduating from high school, Nick had some other dreams, though, to pursue as well, so he sold the quail farm.
Now, the new owner wasn't as successful as Nick, and the business unfortunately closed down. But Nick now has his own welding, fencing, and fabrication business in Burton, but he also has a young son, and he plans to start raising quail again when his boy gets a little older, so they can do it together, pass it down from generation to generation.
And that's really sweet, you know, because he was so interested in it and did such a great job with it that he wants to share those great moments with his son. How great is that?
We can't wait for his son to grow up. We'll do another story on the quail farm.
That's right.
All right, speaking of interesting professions, what woman doesn't like to shop? But how great would it be if we could make a career out of it?
Yeah, we'd all like to do that. Well, that's exactly what Barbara Yarnell was doing way back in 1981.
Yes, hello, this is Barbara.
Barbara Yarnell's title is personal shopper. It's a new service to the Wichita area that's been popular in larger cities for some time.
Okay, and you want this gift wrap, wedding.
It's for people who don't like crowds, don't like shopping, and don't like to waste gas. You simply call Barbara, give her the pertinent information, and she finds what you want, as long as it can be found at one of the Henry's stores.
From each time that somebody orders, I note a little bit more information. Sizes, preferences in perfumes, if I have their anniversary date, things like that.
Then the difficult part begins. From the phone call, Barbara knows the caller wants crystal, but had no specifics.
And so I naturally have to pretty much go by my own judgment and my taste. If, as I say, I knew the person, I might have to pick out something that I didn't particularly like, but I knew they would. But in this case, I will probably put more of my taste into it since I don't know them and she didn't give me any specific guidelines.
There are some perils to being a personal shopper. What happens if the item picked is not what the buyer wanted?
I certainly wouldn't be offended. Everybody's taste is so different, and that's one thing I've really learned being in retail. But I would just have to start from ground zero again and try again.
Barbara says the service also works for very busy people who don't have time to shop for gifts. On this shopping assignment, her customer's crystal gift has been found.
Sure, I think that this little piece of Waterford, she told me that the girl collects crystal, and I think this little jam jar is just perfect. She said a $50 range, this is $47, and I think that should be just about right.
So the gift is found, and Barbara believes that she's made a successful choice.
Oh, yes, I think both my client and the bride-to-be will be very happy.
Barbara Yarnell, the personal shopper, a service where your fingers do the dialing and someone else's legs do the walking. I'm Larry Hatteberg.
Oh my gosh, I love Barbara's hair. Can you say Charlie's Angels?
Yeah, we all knew Barbara, and personal shopping was just a stepping stone for her. Now, she went on to become the executive director of the River Festival, Botanica, and then Ballet Wichitan. And of course, she's married now to Mark Chamberlain, who we worked with at Cake TV forever, and we've known both those folks for a long,
they're
long time.
both heavily involved in the Wichita community still.
Mr. and Mrs. Wichita, really.
Exactly, exactly. Zenda, Kansas, and Kingman County isn't very big. The population is only 80. But Bonnie Bailey had the idea of creating an even smaller version of her hometown, the way it was back in its prime.
My roots are here, I guess.
Small towns are proud towns, and Zenda is one of those. Nestled in southern Kingman County, everything is within walking distance, but over the past 100 plus years, Zenda has changed. There is a wonderful new community center, but many old buildings have come and gone. And no one knows that more than lifelong resident Bonnie Bailey.
Zenda's just always been important to me.
In the old municipal building on Main Street is a complete dollhouse history of Zenda's old Main Street.
I guess it just happened.
Bonnie, with a few friends, created these exact replicas of local businesses that once flourished in this tiny community.
I like history. My roots are here, I guess. Zenda's just always been important to me. There's 36 buildings. I had pictures of the original buildings, and so we went from there. This is the high school. It was built in 1919. You can just step in here and walk back and step back in time. I just thought it would be neat to have my hometown saved in this fashion, I guess. Besides, these are the dollhouses I never had.
It is a main street of memories. There's Weber's restaurant then and now. Just down the street, Kerr's restaurant then and now. And of course, who could forget Zenda's Hotel Royal?
I wish I could step back in time for 2 or 3 days or a week and visit with these folks. This is Zenda's history, and it'll stay alive, hopefully.
And like many other small farm communities, Zenda has lost many of its historic buildings.
It's a little sad, but thankful that there's as many still here as there are. And Zenda's still alive and well. I'm proud of my little tad.
Well, you'll be glad to know that Bonnie and her miniature Main Street are still fixtures in the town of Zenda. Now, Bonnie serves as city clerk, devoted to her community, and she's involved in just about everything.
Meanwhile, the display has been moved to the Zenda Community Museum. There is a Zenda Community Museum where it continues to be a big hit with visitors. I got to go see that. I got to drive just to Zenda and see that.
You'll probably make a traffic jam now. Everybody will want to go to Zenda to see
exactly.
this.
Well, the woman in this next story faced a little bit of a dilemma, but she found a solution with her God-given talents.
And now Deborah Rainey has become famous.
I am a romantic, and I like to have candles lit and music playing and a steaming, cup of coffee or tea beside me. I don't know, those are just things that I guess kind of help set the mood for the kind of books that I write.
When Deborah Rainey pours her soul into a cold computer, there is warmth wrapped in every word.
It's the way I express myself, and it always has been.
Working in her living room, surrounded by all things creative, she remembers those early years.
I can remember the summer that I was either 11 or 12. I spent that summer reading Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House on the Prairie books.
In the back of the book, it said that Laura was a Kansas farm girl who turned to writing.
It was like something clicked right there, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm a little Kansas farm girl. Maybe someday I could grow up and write a book too. And I really did, at that point, just tuck away this dream.
That dream turned into reality. Deborah is now one of the country's leading Christian writers. Some of her 11 books include A Scarlet Cord, After the Rains, and Beneath a Southern Sky.
They're Christian fiction, or inspirational fiction, some people call it. But hopefully they're just good stories.
For years, she was a stay-at-home mom of 3, and then came along a oops baby.
Which was wonderful, but it was at a time when I really, after being a stay-at-home mom for 20 years, needed to start going back to work to help the other kids go to college. And I desperately wanted to stay home with our little girl, our youngest daughter. And so I started thinking, what could I do to make money at home? And writing was where my talent seemed to lie, and so that's what I started doing.
And there were more miracles in her life. Her success was not destined to be only on the printed page, but on the big screen as well.
You have a family.
One of her books, A Vow to Cherish, is now a Hollywood motion picture.
I've seen it, I don't know how many times I've watched this, and I still choke up a little bit every time.
She had cancer, and she passed away this morning.
What it meant for me was not that I was going to have, get to go to Hollywood and go to a film premiere, but what it meant for me was I was going to get to stay home with our little girl. And that was the biggest blessing in it, it really was. And I'm still just a Kansas farm girl. I, have never ever felt like a part of Hollywood or, in Heston I'm just, Ken's wife and Tarl and Toby and Trey and Tavia's mom. That's the identity that I cherish. I hope to be writing till the day I die.
Well, a decade and a half later, she is indeed still writing. Deborah now has 38 books.
Wow.
Not one, not two, 38 books to her name. She and her husband now live in Wichita, but she's often traveling the country for speaking engagements and book signings.
And she's an inspiration to
a lot of
us.
people. You bet.
Okay, now we're going to go back to 1982 and the generation that experienced life from the horse and buggy to space travelers and computers.
Yeah, they saw it all. So many amazing changes and advancements during their lives. But for Ivan DeWitt, life was steady as she goes. He just kept on keeping on.
I guess that ought to take a good picture.
Hogs aren't pretty, but for Ivan DeWitt, they're a living.
She's getting her barn. And she went.
Ivan has lived on this farm near Burlingame for almost all of his 83 years. Twice he moved away, but he always came back to the land.
Well, it's about all I knew. About all I knew how to do. And I liked it, even if it was hard. Yeah, I've never regretted it. Do it over if I had a chance.
Life on the DeWitt farm has never been easy. He raised 10 children on this 40 acres. Even though he has electricity, he still cuts wood to heat his home in the winter.
Really, that was the only heat we had. We even done our cooking on wood.
DeWitt comes from that earlier time when Americans didn't take life for granted. For example, Ivan has kept this little date book since 1899. In it is a list of every pair of shoes he's ever owned and their cost.
Kept getting a little higher all the time. 50 cents a pair. Then they got up to where they bought me a pair of overshoes. They was 65 cents. Then the next pair of shoes went up to $1.
Ivan's brother, who was 10 years old when Ivan was born, started keeping the records on the shoes. The natural question is why.
I think he must have kind of took a liking to me. Maybe, I don't know.
So with his dogs and his hogs, Ivan DeWitt can be called a contented man.
I'll stick it out here as long as I'm able.
It's all the life he's known, and it's all the life he wants.
No regrets.
From Burlingame, Kansas,
Not at
this is
all.
Larry Hatteberg.
Now, Ivan lived another 8 years before passing away in 1990 at age 91.
How many of us can say we have lived truly a life of no regrets? And Ivan, just a simple, wonderful man who lived a life of no regrets.
Just to be able to say that means you've done something right in your life.
Sure does.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all we have for this week. If you have a question or a comment, hey, shoot it right off to Hatteberg's people at kpts.org.
And we'll be sharing more of those comments in a future show. So keep them coming. You might hear about yourself. Until next time, I'm Larry Hatteberg.
And I'm Susan Peters. Join us again next week for more classic stories from the Hatteberg Vault. We'll see you then. Thanks for watching.
Good night.
Support for this program comes from viewers like you. Thank you. For a free copy of this program, become a new member of KPTS for a $40 contribution. If you are already a member, just send $25 for shipping and handling. Be sure to include the program's name, date, and time.